Select Earth Online, which was one of our tools. So this tool is just a way of helping us format our data and in a way that is consistent. Okay. When you go to this website right here, I had you register and sign up. And that's a way that we could just make sure that we can see who labels what. Okay. But if you haven't done it, it's really easy. Register inside of there. And then you'll end up going in and seeing something like this. And you should go find our Globe Observer, the Globe Observer team inside of here. And inside, at the very bottom, you will actually see these projects called SEAS 2023. And I had to break them up into different areas of interest. So, find yourself in the right one. But and so what we are actually doing is we're going in and we're labeling our areas of interest. And so this is going to be a way that we create and connect to the satellite data. Okay. And so I won't go into all the details, because as you guys do this, you'll start having questions, and we can address those on Mighty Networks for some of the details. Mm-hmm. But what we're doing is we have a grid now. This is one of those 100 meter by 100 meter areas that we created a while ago. And that's one of those projects that you guys want to work on, is make this a little bit better to be able to create that. But within that, we want to be able to describe what we're seeing inside of there. So I have created inside of here a grass or buildings. What do we see inside of here? Okay. And to do that, all you have to do is select one of those dots and then go over and label it. It's that easy. And so, this is what we want to create for each one of our 37 100 meter plots, our primary sample units. Okay. And that, that actually gives us information about the amount of grass that's in this area. And then we can use that to understand some of the things that we were talking about. Well, how hot is this area when we measure it with a thermal sensor? Well, why is that? Well, it relates back to these categories of the land cover that's there, right? And so that's how we start to understand those measurements that we were talking about earlier today. And all of the plot areas that you guys are going through and are labeling. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
Peter, one thing I wanted you to mention is, at what level of resolution should they actually be doing this, the classification of the land cover? Because that makes a difference, doesn't it?
Thank you, Rusty.
I don't know. We used to standardize that. I don't know if that's something we want to do this time or not, but
that is so inside of here, you can see, like, I can zoom out and then all of my points start going together. So this is a really important piece of our satellite imagery that goes back to that scale and that pixel size that Bree was highlighting earlier. Some data is on this 50 kilometer scale. So every pixel is the size of 50 kilometers. It's really big. Other data is, if you zoom in on it, it's actually at a 10 meter pixel. So the maps that we're now wanting to look at and understand for our area, every one of these dots is a pixel. So we actually have 100 pixels that make up this area. And so with this dot grid, you can actually see how at a certain, when I zoom in too close, I can't make out any of those features. So that's a resolution piece that is important. And so when you're doing your dot grid, as we call it here, you want to be at this 20 meter resolution when you actually select these points. because you'll notice that they actually change size. And so we want that area that we're labeling to be a consistent size. So you can zoom in and out, that's fine, but recognize that you want each one of these circles to be representing about 10 meters or so, which is at this 20-meter scale. So if you zoom out too far, right, like you can't see anything that's underneath it. And so when you actually are doing your labeling, look at that 20 meters and just try to do your best to imagine and see what's within that particular circle. Mm-hmm. Here, we're looking at a grassland. There's not a lot of interesting things that are happening there, right? But if I, go to a different plot by going to a different plot, going through, I will lose my information. It will go to another location. And here you can see that if I zoom out to that 20 meter, I now see a road, a dirt road or something like that that goes through there. And so here I would go in and select, I can use the shift button to select more than one dot to be efficient here. And I would select all three of those and say, well, that's bare ground. And I would label that like that. So it's a tedious process, but by doing this activity, you are actually creating new data that we can use to understand the satellite imagery. And it helps you to understand what your area is composed of. And
you're turning images into numbers.
That's right. Yeah. And so, I will have a meetup and do science kind of individually on Mighty Networks in the next day or two to go over some of these specifically. But I wanted to mention that you can now log into Collect Earth Online, and I'm clicking through here. But again, if you go in and you log in, you will then have access to being able to see our SEAS 2023 projects. Mm-hmm. And they're listed under everybody else's projects. So you might see SEAS 2021 when we did this, or SEAS 2020 when we did this. And so you can see how we've been building this similar data set up over time. And hopefully you can take advantage of that. But just go in here and you should be able to find your area of interest and at least start looking at it and making some sense out of that second piece of data that we're asking you to create.
Right. And it's tedious, but you only have to do it 37 times. So
3,700 times.
Okay. Well, all right. You have to click on 3,700 points, but you only have to do 37 areas. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Peter, what are we using for a base map?
So this year, right now we're going to initially just use the satellite base map that has been created, that is cloud free, that is the map box that you usually see out there. And we're going to use that as our initial one, but we're hoping that there will be interest from a team or two or a person or two to investigate some of our higher resolution satellite imagery that's coming from a company called Planet. And that actually gives us a way of looking at phenology, like some of the teams had suggested would be important to look at. And so, when we're looking at wetland edges, that might be something that we end up wanting to use and label. But I didn't want to overwhelm everybody with that data because it's not consistent. There's some interesting nuance to it. And so it's still in a research phase of how we use it. And so that is a project that can come in here, is looking at your labeling results as we use a different base map. Would you come up with the same results? And exactly. that's, kind of a larger piece of just trying to understand the satellite data is actually the very first research application before we go to making some forecasting models.
Mhm.
It's just understanding those measurements in our place using our photos, using our satellite imagery like this, and just in our own knowledge of what's in those places
Mhm.
that allow us to start understanding what of these wonderful NASA assets that are out there.
Right.
What do we
And
select?
and looking at those images too, when the first image you were showing of that of the well, the one with the road, I can't tell from looking at that, except through perhaps maybe Gestalt, what's trees, what's bush, and what's grass. But you, as someone who's been in that area, you can say, I remember there were no trees there. And so you will be able to be more accurately able to interpret that data, perhaps even better than the algorithms that have been identified by scientists that have been used to create the maps that we're using for land cover. So there are just really important applications for this. And we have a message here from Jeff. He said, for some reason, his Collect Earth account doesn't work because he can't reset his password, or he doesn't have a password. Is that something that you can address now, or did you need to talk with him offline?
We might have to talk about that offline, because I remember there was some issues with somebody else, and maybe it was you, Jeff, actually, who was I was not able to register for some reason. And so it might be that we just have to find some other workaround for that. So and it could be that I end up not making it where you have to log in. Yeah. So again, I have that set specifically so that I can track who labeled what. And if somebody messes up and labels somebody else's plots or does something wrong like that, I have a way of tracking it back.
Okay.
And so Jeff, I think that was an issue you mentioned 2 weeks ago or so. And
Yeah,
so let's
Jeff
follow
and
up on it.
Oliver both have mentioned that this is a problem. So
Yeah, which
a
is
couple of people are having problems. Yeah.
yeah, so we don't want that to happen. And again, this is just one way of doing this method of labeling a location, right? And I want to highlight that we're labeling aerial images, and we're just using this particular web tool because it's easy. But we could also switch to some other tools to do exactly the same activity and the same method. Okay, so this is a much better image to label. In our area of interest one. So, usually this is what you guys will be dealing with. But just recognize this is that satellite view that we're trying to understand in terms of our resolution image, our limitation that we're seeing here, but also what makes up this location at this moment in time.
Mhm. Good. And Osaraman has mentioned, wait, so do we use the Mapbox satellite base map? I guess he's asking.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'll see here that, this is a really important thing that where here we can actually provide some image imagery options from aerial imagery or from drones or from other things like that, and go through the same activity of labeling what's underneath those points in that location. Here we because of just it's free. That's the main thing, is it's free, and it's consistent. We're using this map box, but you can also see, we can switch over to see this is a thematic representation of that location. And so here it doesn't, this is what somebody has done to take a satellite imagery and turn it into a map, right? But we want to label the satellite imagery. And you'll see on a lot of websites, there is this map box satellite imagery as the base map. And I'll get a little bit more detailed about, this is good reference information, but there's limitations to it. We can't do certain modeling or use it in particular ways. So yeah, for right now, this is the default that I have inside of there, is the Mapbox satellite imagery, but you can also switch over and see the thematic view, how people are labeling this. So it could be rivers, it could be other things like that. But going between these two views allows you to then go and label this as a bare ground piece,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's what this activity is all about. If you want to learn more about the data underneath here, you can do the open in a new link here, and you can learn all about what that Mapbox data is and some things like that. So it is an important thing because that is copyrighted data.
Okay.
All right, like I said, I'll be hopping over and we'll be doing a whole thing about real-time labeling of your location, so that as you go through, if you have questions or issues, we can address that. I just want to highlight right here, this is just kind of really amusing. We actually, I think right here, these are people standing in the middle of this soccer field. Who are doing some activity. And so, I just find this to be really fascinating, how at first I wouldn't know what this is, but the shadow gives away what the object actually is.
That's right. You can tell it's a person.
You could tell this person, these could just be trees or something
That's
like that,
right.
right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's an actual person. And then I'll
yeah.
point out, because usually we look at, tree shadows as a way to see what the shape of that tree is. But that's kind of the fun thing that you might find opportunistically, is funny things in the satellite imagery that were captured at that moment. And that's the discovery part of your research that you're doing with us. Is I can guarantee nobody else has really noticed the people on the soccer field before that are right adjacent to the center of this area of interest. So that's me. I could keep going on for a while like this, but that's why we're going to do a meetup and do a real time to talk about some of these fun things that you guys are finding.
I can guarantee that if you can do it in real time with Peter, it's really a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because you can share screens back and forth and say, "Hey, what the heck is this?" And so
we're the happy people on that thing earlier. If you do it by yourself, yeah, you can have fun, but it's a lot more interesting, and you can tell I can go off for a while on this. So thanks for entertaining me, everybody.